Virtual reality is exciting, but will virtual reality become a best place for lying? So that's what I would like to discover today. I'm very happy to start today a new session of talks, the TiiQu Talks, all around the latest technologies and sustainability. I'm happy to be together with three friends that have hands-on experience in the space. Brendon McNaughton from ArtGate VR, who will talk about their exhibition through VR. Duncan Russell from Cognizant, who researched and applied virtual reality into the corporate context, and Alexander Carter-Silke. Alexander will help us to make some reflections about the ethics of innovation. I remember a comment from Alex in another talk, and he was saying, the more you guys innovate, the more work for lawyers. So I think which it sounds a little bit costly, so it's better to explore where the hidden risks of emerging technologies lie. A quick one about TiiQu Talks. We at TiiQu, we are not really a non-for-profit. We like making money, of course, but we like more contributing to a world where we can trust each other, and the trust in business starts where you know who your interlocutor is. So our job is inspiring trust in people. MyTiiQ is the latest technology that we will be releasing at the end of the year for skilled people who build their reputation by co-creating and contributing knowledge. So the way it works basically is that people build questions that signal one's knowledge in a specific domain. Validated questions are added to tests, and the user can answer questions, growing their Q score, convert their level of expertise into immutable records with the help of blockchain, and continuously benchmark their level of expertise against a crowd of peers. So allow me a pitch. If you do have the skills in sustainability, emerging tech, and mathematics, join us. Click MyTiiQ at TiiQu.com. And last but not least, please, if you do have expertise and you want to share knowledge, join us in our talks and share your expertise with others, so that we build a community of skilled people around the very important emerging technologies and the ethical use of emerging technologies. So I give the stage to our first speaker, who is Brendon. Brendon, please join us with your exciting demonstration. And so the stage is yours.
Yeah, that's good. And just so that I can do that, Laura, if you wouldn't mind giving me permission to do a screen share, then I can do that. But while that's getting set up, I just want to introduce myself to everybody. My name is Brendon McNaughton. I'm the co-founder and CEO of ArtGate VR. Just as a very high level, I want to introduce an idea of the metaverse and the way that I see that it's structured. So the metaverse, you can think of, it's like a new continent that we just discovered. It's this new geographic area that's being built up and developed right now. And we are one of the groups that's developing the metaverse. Within the metaverse, you can picture it as a big umbrella. There's subsections of the metaverse that we refer to as districts. So there's the ArtGate district. If you want to go into the metaverse and explore art and connect with art people in the art world, you go into the ArtGate district. There's other districts like Facebook Horizon, VR Chat, AltSpace VR, Decentraland. There's a lot of different districts and areas of the metaverse that all provide different experiences for you. So the ArtGate district is what I'm one of the developers of and one of the creators of. So what I'm going to be doing today is talking about that a little bit. I'm going to actually be putting on a VR headset. We got one here, and I'm going to share what I'm looking at in virtual reality and walk you through the ArtGate district. So there is a couple of ways that you can enter into the metaverse through a VR headset, or you could also enter through a laptop. You can download a version of ArtGate onto your laptop or VR headset, and you can enter it that way. When you do enter the district, you'll be able to see other people. You can talk with them. You can shake their hands. You can walk through doorways that bring you into these beautiful galleries with artworks from all over the world. So right now, in the context of this specific panel, the future of work with virtual reality, I would say the present day is what I'm going to be showing you. There's a lot of businesses, there's a lot of galleries that are opening up retail locations, which are art galleries, and they're sharing the artwork with the visitors, and visitors are collecting the artwork. So somebody will open up a gallery, they'll put artwork in, and then a collector will come in and buy the artwork from them. So from a relationship and a meeting that takes place in the metaverse, you have artwork being shipped all over the world. It's absolutely incredible what's possible right now with respect to virtual reality and the metaverse. So let's jump on in real quick so I can show you a little bit about what we're talking of. So I am going to do a screen share. Just 1 second. Can you all see? Oh, I don't think you can.
I can see your Zoom, your browser window at the moment, Brendon.
And what's the browser say?
It's just Zoom at the moment.
Scheduling made easy.
Okay.
And then Oculus Cast, yeah.
Okay, perfect. All right, so right now, through my VR headset, I'm in the metaverse. And what I'm gonna do is cast what I'm looking at to my computer so that you can see what I'm looking at. Okay, so can you all see my hands in virtual reality? Can you see the beautiful sunset I'm looking at now?
Yes.
All right, so this is my home area of the metaverse. And what we're going to be looking at is the business that takes place in the art world in the metaverse. So this is work that takes place in virtual reality. So those are my blue hands. This is a picture from one of the galleries. And this is actually a corporate outing. This group of people, the blue, the pink, the red, the orange, those are all avatars. Those are all real people. You can see them, you can talk with them, you can shake their hands. This is actually a corporate outing that a company did in our platform. And if any of those people liked any of the artwork, they could talk with the art gallery and they could purchase the artwork and it would get shipped off to them in the real world. So that's what it looks like to be in a room in ArtGate with a bunch of people in the metaverse. So it's not really the future of work. This is present day reality of what's possible in virtual reality. So I'm going to open up ArtGate. We'll go into the main lobby and you'll be able to see a little bit more what I'm talking of. So it will just take a second to load up. And once we're loaded, you'll be able to see. And like I said, you can access ArtGate through your VR headset, or you can also go in through your laptop. So I'm just choosing my avatar color, I'm setting my nickname, and I'm going into the main lobby. So this is the main lobby of the ArtGate district. All of those doorways bring you into different collections from around the world. So Lone Fun Gallery is a collection from New York. There's some NFTs in there, some great glitch art. Divide by Zero collection is an amazing collection from Hong Kong. We have a museum collection through there, big private collection. Chris Contini Contemporary, Baron Grafton Art House are from Europe. Hashtag Gallery from Toronto. So there's lots of galleries off the main lobby, and then there is more galleries to the menu as well. So we're just going to walk into one gallery. Let's start off with, let's go into the Divide by Zero collection. So I'm currently in Toronto, in Canada, but by walking through this doorway, I'm going into the gallery space of a Hong Kong collector. His name is Jacobo Garcia Gill. He's the founder of the Divide by Zero collection. So this is, this is where he does business. He has people come into his gallery space from wherever they may be in the world through their laptop or VR headset. He talks with them, he gives exhibition tours, he educates people, and builds up relationships and business through this location that he has in the metaverse. So this is sort of present day reality of what's possible. And then once I show you this room, then I'll take the headset off and talk about a bit of where I see the future of all of this going. So when you come in a room, you have this beautiful white cube aesthetic. You have the exhibition statements up on the wall here. This specific exhibition is called Post-Internet. Kind of suiting that we're walking through the metaverse looking at this exhibition. So there's information panels about each piece. You can go right up, you can look at the artworks in a lot of detail, you can touch the artwork. So these are all real artworks that exist in the physical world, but he has them on exhibition in the metaverse. And this is his place of business. And all of those doorways through the main lobby and all the other galleries through the menu, that's other galleries that have their places established, and they host events. There's if there was an event going on, there'd be people all over the place that you could see and you could talk with. So this is the current state of work in virtual reality with respect to the arts. I'm just gonna pop my headset off and then continue chatting in the physical world. All right. So I just have about 1 minute left. So this is current day reality. This is virtual reality, where people are going. They're establishing galleries. They're building communities, they're building client bases, they're connecting with their customers, they're doing deals, shipping artwork off to the other side of the world, all through the metaverse right now, through a VR headset, through a laptop. So the current state of the technology is absolutely incredible. It allows them to sidestep a lot of expenses. Otherwise, they'd have to be shipping artwork all over the world. Doing international flights in order to meet with international clients as well. So the ability to do to network with people and to connect with art through the metaverse is allowing people to bring down their expenses significantly while they're increasing their international network. So it's been a really exciting chapter. Specifically for how work is changing in the art world because of the metaverse and because of virtual reality. So that's just very high level what we're doing at Artgate, and that's my 10 minutes. So I'll let somebody else take the baton from here.
Thank you very much. Very interesting, Brendon. We will take questions at the end of the three interventions. I now give the stage to our friend Duncan. Please, Duncan, would you like to explain how all this dream that Brendon just explained is translated into the corporate context?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Brendon, and thanks, Laura. That was really great to see. So hi, everybody. My name is Duncan Roberts. I work for a company called Cognizant, who are probably the biggest company that you might never have heard of. We've got about 300,000 people in the company, and we do all sorts of things from project management to consultancy to delivery of technical services. So you may have seen us a bit more recently on the Aston Martin Formula One car. There's some quite prominent sponsorship. But I work for the portion of the company called the Centre for the Future of Work. And we are looking at the ways in which technology is changing work and how we think that will develop over the next 5, 10, 15 years. And I personally have quite a strong interest in VR and AR. Prior to joining Cognizant, actually, in my spare time, I worked with Google developing some of their initial launch applications for their now dead Daydream VR headset. And they're currently still ongoing AR core augmented reality platform for various different devices. So doing that, I've now translated that over to looking into how VR works in a corporate world, as Laura said. And it's really interesting what Brendon says about the metaverse, because there's a lot of talk about the metaverse at the moment. And I think the interesting thing about it is that it means a different thing to different people. What I like to see it as in a corporate sense, and I think it's really important to emphasize that I'm looking at things from a work perspective and a corporate perspective, is that VR is another tool in the corporate armory to allow for various things to happen. Now, when the pandemic hit, obviously everybody started working from home, and we've all got used to Zoom and Teams calls, etc. And there's actually been some really interesting research done by Harvard University on why everybody feels so rubbish at the end of a Zoom call. And primarily that's because we are looking at each other in the eye all the time. And I'm looking dead ahead all the time, and I have to focus on that. You might see me stare at my notes just to make sure that I'm saying what I thought I was going to say, but primarily we're just staring at each other all the time, and that's not natural. The way in which Zoom calls are run is not natural. When you're in a meeting, you might be sat in one place, but you're not looking at the same place the whole time. You're looking around the room, you're looking at different people, you're looking at your notes, you're looking at a presentation. What VR can do as a tool in a collaborative sense for work is re-establish that natural human collaboration. It might seem a bit counterintuitive at first, but it brings a human aspect through its virtual nature. So having the hands tracked, having the gaze tracked allows you to look round. You are collaborating people in a 3D space. So that's one element of where I see virtual reality going in the future of work in terms of collaboration. Of course, collaboration doesn't just mean meetings, sitting around a boardroom table, looking at everybody. It could be a presentation. It could be somebody standing on a stage presenting to a crowd. It could be training. That's often a collaborative exercise and not something that's done alone, and often is done with practical exercises or role play or learning how to turn a lever or something like that. There's a lot of great examples of VR training programs out there that significantly reduce the cost and enable repeatability of exercises that the physical world just doesn't allow you to do. The other interesting thing that I'm finding about it, as well as its collaborative nature, its ability to do things that you can't do in the real world and to give you lots of different tools, is with a view to sustainability. Now, Brendon alluded to this and Laura alluded to this earlier on, but if you're meeting with people across the globe in a more natural human way, where you can read body language, you can all be together in a virtual space, then you don't need to travel as much. Yes, that has a great cost implication, but also it has a really good sustainability implication for your company in terms of cutting down travel. It also widens your talent pools, where somebody doesn't need to be physically located in an office in order to work for a company, allowing you to widen your net when you're looking for people to work for you. So there's a lot of benefits to this. I also think personally, it increases your ability to be innovative, because VR gives you tools that you might not necessarily have in a physical space. you can then think about things that you might do that you might not have done before. So let me give you an example of that I think Brendon might like, actually. And this is personal to me. I've recently downloaded a VR app called Vermilion, which is an oil painting app. And now oil painting is not something that I would ever have thought about trying out. But here, I've tried it out. It is wonderful. I'm loving it, and I'm spending quite a bit of time learning how to oil paint, and it's incredibly realistic. So I encourage you to seek it out. But you extrapolate that to the corporate world, and things that people might not have been able to do initially, they are now able to do. It's because they can bring in things from
Siri, spell lip syncing.
Sorry?
Lip syncing.
Anyway, yeah, so you are able to bring in tools that you may not necessarily be able to use in the physical world. So there's some really interesting aspects there. I've only got 10 minutes, so I'm trying to cover as much ground as I can, but we'll open this up for questions later on. So what I'll do is I'll just finish off with something I had a chat with Laura about when we first met, which was about the skills needed to actually develop and use in the workplace in VR. So if we use VR as a tool to help us work, to help us connect with people, to use different tools that we might not necessarily have in the physical world, then a lot of the time, the skills that we have in the physical world can also apply to the virtual world. For instance, if you are an architect or a designer, a set designer for theatre, you can also be a set designer in VR. You can also be an architect in VR. Those, because it is a natural way of doing things, those skills can transfer across. But in terms of those things where you're the skills that you need to actually develop, it's always coding, computer science, 3D modeling is incredibly important. I was always really interested and did some development in virtual and augmented reality, but I could never, ever create anything artistic in a 3D sense because I'm not very good at it. So getting a wide breadth of skills to help develop your VR applications for both corporate, artistic, commercial applications is really important. Overall, I think it's a really exciting time. I think it's still nascent, and there's a lot of friction to getting businesses to employ it. But I really do see a future in this. But when leading into, no doubt, what Alex is going to talk about, I think there's also some ethical implications. Not in the least who the biggest player in the market in the commercial sense is, i.e. Facebook, and what they're doing with your data when they're tracking your biometrics every time you use VR. How does that apply to an employer who's also doing the same? What do your employees think about that? Right down to when you're in VR, what does your avatar look like? And how do you represent yourself in VR? And how do companies allow people to represent themselves in the way that feels true to them? So there are myriad questions and implications for this, but I think we're going to see an explosion in this in very many industries over the next few years. So I look forward to seeing where that's going. Thank you. I think that's about my time up.
That's fantastic. Fantastic, Duncan. Very good.
I've rattled that off.
But we will then have time during the chat. I see coming up some interesting questions also around the IP and the ethics of virtual reality. Duncan just said that basically he postponed any question to the future, which opened up that in the middle, what do we do? Because
I'm going to read the chat and see. I'll read the chat and see if I can think of any answers while Alex is speaking.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions there.
Yeah, Alex, you want to say how much it will cost all this?
No, I don't. Okay, shall I give an intro? I have to confess, it's like rather confessing that you're an estate agent, but I've been a lawyer for 33 years. And I am positively supportive of technology. So anything I say after this, if it sounds negative or cautionary, I'm sorry, but most of my time has been spent in my career enabling people with ideas and technology to develop them, obtain investment in them, protect them, and deal with what I would call bad actors. And fortunately, the two presentations, I think, are amazing. I just love this stuff. Over the years, people walk into my room and they say one or two things. I've got an idea, is usually the first one. I'd like to do this. How do I do this? Or occasionally, some bastard has nicked what I've done. And it's usually a variation of any of those. So over the years, I'm now a consultant lawyer. I consult with a number of law firms. And over the years, the advice that we've ended up giving has been, you realize it's informed by the law, but it isn't legal advice. It's how do I structure, how do I interact with people? And let me just take you back a step. And this is a little bit of jurisprudence. Law is about the interaction between legal people. And let me explain that. The law is a set of rules. Whether you go through any of the great religions of the world, there are a set of rules. Christianity had the 10 Commandments. They're the basic rules about the way we interact. Now you'll see where this is going, because virtual worlds are about interaction. And the law deals with how do we adjust our behavior between ourselves and other people? How do we deal with our neighbors? How do we behave in social environments? We shouldn't be prejudiced. We shouldn't be discriminatory. Those are rules. They're rules of behavior. We regulate, government regulates how people interact with the government. And in public international law, we have treaties which affect how governments interact. And all of these rules they haven't actually changed for thousands of years. One of the biggest main sources of law, Roman law admittedly, was a thing called the Justinian Institutes. Over 2,000 years ago they were written. And you can write them down on a piece of paper today and you can still apply them. And the point being made in this that I'm making is that I've seen the birth of the internet. This is going to make me sound really old to some of you. But I saw the birth of the internet, and I remember sitting in a legal office, in the old days with the ISDN modems twittering away in the background, and people saying, well, what is this going to do? I remember that. That's in my lifetime. There's been more technological change in the last 20 years in the digital space than there have been in the last 200. The way society has been affected by digital technology, I think, is greater than any other time in history. Now, there's a couple of things that have made it a real challenge for me as a lawyer. I found myself looking at all these inventions and saying, not how does the law apply to this, but how should people behave in these environments? Because sooner or later, the judges, the regulators, the government will catch up. And we move from being able, when the technology moves as fast as it can, I've repeated this to so many clients and people, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should do it. And the technology, and I'm not just leaning on virtual reality, but I'm going to come back to a specific reference point on what we mean by virtual. there's a great human trait, which is to replicate. We produce sculptures, we produce representations of things, we produce artwork, which are representations of things. And one of the things that I've seen evolving in the virtual reality space, particularly in relation to interactions, is that, you know, the question is this an emulation of the real world, or is it something new? Are we actually, when we call it reality, why do we call it virtual reality? I want to deal, so in terms of what we should do, and I'm going to just raise a couple of things that are not quite on point, but we have developing what I termed, it was called atomic composability. And atomic composability means that you can take one digital representation in one environment, such as in the cryptosphere, and you can translate it into any other type of media around the world. NFTs are a good example. You can move them across platforms. You can create avatars of people in the real world. And that means you can recompose how these relationships work. And we've got to think about this. I'm not saying this as a restrictive, but I think if anyone is working in this space, and this has been touched on earlier in the previous school, is how do people interact? How do they behave? What is misleading? What's honest? What's dishonest? We have years of courts deciding that people were misled, they were misrepresented, they were abused, they were discriminated against. In the AI world, there's a lot of work been done on the inherent discrimination created by mathematical algorithms. Now, I distinguish, by the way, between people call AI something which makes a decision. I don't. Because there are a lot of mathematical constructs where the decision is based on the mathematics which are fed in. They're preconceived before you put them in the machine. True artificial intelligence is when the machine decides what weight to give to any particular factor. So and for those who are programmers, I can run if-then statements, SQL statements, which say, if these 5 factors are present, the answer is this. But that's not intelligence, that's processing. When artificial intelligence mixes with virtual reality, now you've got a completely different set of factors. So I do argue with the word virtual reality. I would call it a synthetic reality. Now, the ethic, I'm going to give you, well, this is a bugbear of mine, and it's just an example. In heuristic terms, if you look at most people's day, their actual behavior varies by only about 5%. Now, having been a litigator for many, many years and been in court, and actually worked with some of the great advocates, the predictability of witnesses is unreal. And I worked with one of the great libel silks, and I remember doing a case on a very famous libel case, and the whole case was destroyed by one question, because and I think this has already been said, the human reaction to the question was palpable. It was actually the Hamilton had fired case, and the silk asked the question, Mr. Hamilton, does an honest man take home his day's wages in a brown envelope? Completely inadmissible question. And before the judge actually bit his head off, the counsel just said, don't answer that. That would not have worked in a synthetic reality. It could not have worked. So the way you behave, the way you interact in any environment, the body language, the way we sweat, the way we inflect, creates a truth. Another well-known barrister once said to me in the context we were having an argument about whether something was true, and he said, Alex, the problem is it's not the truth told honestly. And I've carried that around with me for years, because you can tell the truth, but you don't tell it honestly. You don't tell the whole truth. You don't represent it in context. And in a virtual world, you can change context. And everything we make judgments on, the way, and judges may have to make a judgment in context. Now, so the big bugbear was, with all that mathematics, actually, the ability to predict, for example, which issues will most affect a population in terms of an election is really well known. The mathematics are really, really well defined. And that's what has swayed huge numbers of elections. I know we can do it. I can predict behavior. The question is, should we? And that's where the ethics come in, is when we're developing these technologies, and I am absolutely not saying we shouldn't develop the technologies. I believe, and this is 30 years of dealing with interpersonal relationships, that the real winners will be the ones that understand human behavior and enhance it and don't distort it. There is a growing additional concept or difficulty, which I call asymmetries. Sometimes we talk about it as inclusivity and diversity, but if you look across the world, there are massive asymmetries. And the biggest asymmetry at the moment is the ability to actually participate in the technological society. I live in Cambridge. If you don't have a PhD and you're not a scientist, you're not going to get a job. Because, I mean, that's not quite true, because we've got teachers and we've got people who drive buses and around it. But if you want the high value jobs, you're going to have to be able to participate technologically. So if we're talking about synthetic environments, the question is not just who can participate, but also who's excluded. How does this virtual reality world in the workplace, how does it include a craftsman whose participation in the workforce depends on his ability to hit a piece of metal? How does it include someone who is particularly articulate or a great leader? How are those people going to be included in this new work environment? Now, here's a positive. I've been over the last, you've got to watch me on time, by the way, because I'll ramble all night if you're not careful. I've been fascinated by watching the evolution affected by Zoom. And I do like the idea of being able to interact in a more three-dimensional way. I love it. I see huge possibilities. I see the possibilities of being able to show and demonstrate skills in a way that I'm a massive fan of learning skills on YouTube. But what if I could actually interact with the materials? You know, sad old bastard, I go and learn welding on a Monday night. But what if I could actually try out a welding skill virtually? I mean, that's a fantastic opportunity. At the moment, I look at a YouTube video and then I go and burn my hands. But, you know, what if I could try these skills out? What if I could make those training areas more accessible to people? What if I could reduce asymmetries by making them more accessible? Now, let me go back to, I believe that the way we make rules, and you know, everybody says, "Oh, I'm a lawyer." He's a lawyer. You know, he's going to stop everything. We're trained to say no, which is actually true. But I believe if we make rules to enhance the positive, and if we can persuade people that rules are good, rules that include people are good, then I think you're moving towards ethical rules. I have a big problem with issues like data privacy, because we have all of these rules, and it isn't about the rules. It's about what's right and what's wrong. It's about behaviors. Using someone's data in a bad actor way is wrong. But then everybody shares information on a daily basis. It's all out there. And I've been arguing, probably, it'll probably an argument will go long after I've left the law, that actually there comes a point when making hard and fast rules in these new worlds that are so flexible, they're so composable. How do you make a rule? The answer is you can't. You have to set out a set of principles, the principles about how people should interact, the truth told honestly. And if we go forward with these technologies, and what's going to accelerate, in my view, is not whether electric cars are, forgive me for this, but not whether electric cars are the answer to a problem. I love futurology because you can't be wrong, because by the time you get the answer, you're going to be dead. Or something else is going to happen. But then I love that. I'd rather talk about vision. Imagine a world in which this could happen, far more positive than this is going to happen, because we don't know what's going to happen. But if this is going to happen, here are the rules which we think you should apply in those circumstances. And that is where we've ended up as lawyers. 90% of our work, we work in the crypto field particularly, is saying to clients, I know you can do that, but we don't think you should. Or if you are going to do it, these are the warnings, the notices, the way in which you should interact with the people that act with you. This is how you should tell the truth honestly. So, yeah, I've gone over time already, and I could witter all night. But we are in this field of these rules of interaction. We're not being asked what the law is. That's not the question we're ever asked by technology companies. We're asked, how can we implement this technology without adversely affecting people unfairly? Because that's when new law is made. And the law is no more than a set of rules of interaction and behavior. So I'll bring myself right back to the beginning. All these technologies are ways of interacting. You've got to work out what the rules are of that interaction and think really deeply. Otherwise, you end up with what I call the law of unintended consequences. Someone gets hurt, not because it's deliberate, but because there are bad actors out there who will take advantage of the technology to mislead, to commit fraud and worse. But I'm a massive, I want us to be enablers. I started as an economist. Well, actually, I started as an economist, ended up as a lawyer, and I'll probably end up back as an economist just before they nail the box down. It's an exciting time, and this composability between technologies, between the maths of the algorithms, artificial intelligence, machine learning, and new ways of interacting. I mean, it's the most. I
close you here, otherwise we we have no time for our chat.
I'm done.
Thank you very much, Alex. I find it finally ended up that again the responsibility is over us as developers and owners of new projects in finding the right way to go. I was hoping in much more help, Alex, but of course you're a lawyer, so you use the words in a fantastic way. That's your job. Great. So guys, I think it's now time to go to questions. we have lots of questions also in the chat, but I would say that we start with the very initial ones sent by emails, and then if anybody want to raise their hand and add some additional questions, let's go. Well, let's start with a very basic one. What is the potential of the VR? And what could be the problem, the barriers that to VR use cases? Who want to take that? Maybe Brendon?
Yeah, sure. So thinking about VR from a hardware perspective, as the hardware develops, I think there's the potential for major social and economic changes. So this VR headset, for example, this is the Oculus Quest 2. I describe this as the brick cell phone stage of the technology. I think over the next few years to decades, we're going to go from a VR headset like this, that's basically like wearing a toaster on our face, to a VR headset like this. So you put on a pair of glasses. With those glasses, there will be virtual reality and augmented reality enabled in them. So there is companies right now that are already have versions of this, but it's not available mass market, whereas this is available mass market right now. So imagine a world where people are wearing VR, AR enabled glasses that look something along the lines of this. You're going to be able to very seamlessly transition from the physical world to a digital world. So yes, there's all this great potential that comes from that, but also it's going to create so many unknown issues and problems. Like somebody's walking down the street and then they get distracted by something virtually that's happening in their glasses, and then they walk into a post or something, or they trip over something and get hurt. So there's going to be a lot of adjustment with respect to how people's attention is captivated, just from the physical world to the virtual worlds. Imagine walking down a street with these VR, AR glasses on, you see the physical world, and then you have all these digital ads popping up in front of you. How frustrating would that be if there wasn't some sort of regulation around that, right? But at the same time, how nice would it be if you have your directions to your cafe that's just popping up in your field of view as you're working your way to a cafe, and there's an arrow that says, oh, take your next left and you'll be at the cafe in 500 meters. That would be pretty nice to have. So there's going to be a lot of benefits and a lot of potential for things to get extremely frustrating and overwhelming. So I'm optimistic for the good aspects of it, and I hope the challenging aspects, there is some ways that it can be managed in a way that actually results in a benefit for people.
Does anyone have to say something on this, Duncan? What's your point?
Yeah, sure. So I agree with Brendon. I think the hardware certainly is going to become smaller, going to become less expensive, less friction to wearing. I think that there's some strides being made in one of the most noticeable barriers to entry, which is motion sickness. I think you see people employing haptics to sort of tap on your head as you're doing it to simulate motion. There's a great video out there of a sort of a dystopian world where you're walking around with AR glasses on, and there's just ads everywhere, and it's like Blade Runner on steroids. It's absolutely terrifying, and I think that's really interesting. That one concern I have, major concern I have at the moment is borne out by Facebook releasing not their AR spectacles, but their smart spectacles, and it's an important distinction to make. That their collaboration between Ray-Ban is not an AR thing; it's a smart thing. It's basically like the Snapchat spectacles that you had in the past. One of the ethical dilemmas I think that is that those have got cameras in them, And it's all well and good having Facebook having privacy pages around, for you as the owner of the spectacles, but that camera is not looking at you. That camera is looking at everybody around you and capturing them and taking that data. And what are Facebook doing with that data? I am not consenting to being filmed. And as soon as I see somebody with a pair of Ray-Ban glasses on now, I'm like, oh, I'm going to get out of the way, thank you. That has some serious privacy implications if you're looking at the wearing of any device which requires a camera on it to scan the environment, to either put some augmented reality on board or take photos or use to track your virtual reality projection that you're looking at. So there are myriad ethical concerns, and I thought Alex's talk there was absolutely fantastic about the behaviors that we have to employ when we're using virtual space. There's a lot of stuff that I've looked into where you have to behave as if you were in the physical world, i.e. being up in someone's face in virtual reality is just as socially unacceptable as it is in the real world, and let alone all the other issues that places on top. So I think the issues that we're going to face going forward with VR as the future of work, as the future of a consumer-based product, are largely not technical, they are sociological. And I think there's a lot of work to be done there.
But this drives down in how will virtual reality change people? Because the point that Brendon was telling us, well, there is the risk for someone walking and seeing something more interesting in their glasses instead they stop looking at what happens on the road. But what about people who will no more walk? Because finally, sitting on the sofa, you have everything. So will the youngster move? How will this impact the way young people interact with the world? If I'm personally hiring very young guys from the Kickstart scheme, and you know what I realized? 18, 20 years, there is a huge difficulty in communication, in interacting. They are much more comfortable in sending out messages than talking. So what will happen with virtual reality, with this additional layer, which is absolutely comfortable because it's also exciting?
Yeah, I completely agree. And I'll just add before letting somebody else talk that I think this is part of the reason why I'm very keen on looking at this as a tool rather than an existence, as it were. I think we have to be careful, we have to moderate, and we have to keep close tabs. If we don't come up with those principles and those behaviors, both inside virtual reality and the way in which we use it, now it will be too late. So we must start doing that right away.
I'm a behavioralist. I mean, when I was an economist, I was a behavioral economist, and I've never ceased to amaze. I mean, you look at the world as we face it now, the tragedy of the commons. We all know that climate change is going to kill millions of people, but collectively and individually, people tend to act with rational self-interest. You're going to see where my economics come from. Not working out how people are going to, setting rules doesn't make people behave in a particular way. Rational, that's why when we draft contracts, the one clause that people spend more time on than any other clause in the contract is the termination provision. And the reason for that is the one point in the contract when the parties don't have to cooperate. Because if you're trading with somebody every day, a lot of people trade with each other every day. They don't have contracts. We do things with people every day. We don't write agreements down how we're going to do with them. But when you get to the point at which someone's going to break that treaty, then the self-interest changes. And how people behave, how they should behave, is not going to be, sometimes it's affected by rules. Like all these discussions, there are no absolutes. The thing that worries me is that when I look, and I'm picking up this point about young people, I would have thought that by the time I'd been in practice as a lawyer for 30 years, I would have been shown a clean pair of heels by 22, 23-year-olds. And yet I'm busier than I've ever been. Why? And the reason is because after 30 years, I can link economics with politics, with art, with technology, with law, and I can put it in context. And context is everything. And the problem with living, whether you're a teenager living in front of a TV screen or on your phone, is you don't have context. People can say what they like because there's no recourse. There's no social constraint. If you're in a pub with 10 people and you say something stupid, your behavior is going to be moderated in a different way than it's moderated virtually. So that's why I've said I think a lot of these things are ethical, they're behavioral, they're social, and there's a big responsibility to using them. But I wouldn't want to constrain them, because otherwise you sound like a Luddite. We don't do that because the future will go to shit. No, it won't, because actually, on a whole, there are more good people out there than there are bad actors. Because if there weren't, we couldn't survive. And sure, there's a point been made about, pumping and dumping crypto on the market. And Richard's smiling. It's a good point. But why doesn't it happen every day? Well, the answer is because it happens every day, people will exclude you from the market. They won't trust you. And sometimes when you release the rules and rely on trust, you get a harder reality, a stronger bond than when you're just relying on rules. So, yeah, okay, I'll shut up. I'm quite passionate about this subject.
On the topic of trust, the point is on what you base your trust, but that's another topic, probably not for today.
Yeah, well, trust and ethics are close together. They're close bedfellows.
Yeah, sure, but not necessarily trust happens through ethics, through the lens of ethics. I don't know. Not sure about that. Why do trust comes in many? Trust is in one way of looking at it. Trust is about believing somebody will respond in a particular way when they've got no legal or other obligation to do so, that they will act well. They'll be a good actor. That's trust. It's because trust is about the future. It's about what's going to happen tomorrow. I don't need to trust about the past. I know what's happening in the past. I want to know, can I trust you to behave in a particular way tomorrow? If I give you a £5 note and say, give it me back tomorrow, can I trust you? And that's how banking works. Banking works on trust. I'm going to lend you money and I'm trusting you to repay it. Has consequences if you don't. But in the virtual world, you can remove the synthetic world. You remove the daily interaction which persuades people into trust, the rational self-interest. Which brings in also something more. How do you trust that the person in the virtual world is the person that you think is?
That's why I use the word synthetic rather than virtual. It's exactly why I use the word synthetic.
So I would be curious to learn in a museum, in a VR-powered museum, how do you trust the person visiting and eventually purchasing something?
We spend a lot of time now in the crypto sphere. Here's the irony. 5 years ago, people said, oh, the smart contract is the contract. You don't need to trust. And you know what we spent the last 6 months doing? Writing contracts. Writing contracts about what the obligation is when you use a wallet, what your interaction with a distributed ledger is, what property exists in, and it's gone full. And you know what's more? Distributed ledgers have become centralized because now you've got governance of the ledger evolving. Yeah. So the way people behave and the way they should behave, and God thank they do, because otherwise there'd be no job for me. I need bad actors. I hope some of you are real villains.
I've got another question. Sorry.
I would like to just kind of chime in with respect to how I see, I guess, behavior evolving in the Artgate district. That was something that when we first started this, we were very interested to see how it would unfold. In the beginning, we had no etiquette. We had never been in these spaces before. We were just building the first rooms. And when I tested the very first time that we released multiplayer with our CTO, we were so excited and we just waved our hands in each other's faces because we couldn't believe we were actually in the metaverse seeing each other, even though we weren't in the same room. And then the same thing would happen with all these new people. They would come in and they were curious and they're like, what's it look like on the inside of the head of your avatar? And so there was these really kind of curious explorations and interactions. And then as more and more people came into the platform, there was just this self-organizing way of behaving. So in the beginning, somebody completely new, first time in the metaverse or first time in Artgate, they usually run around, they get really close to somebody's face because they don't realize how uncomfortable it makes someone. They will put their hands in other people's faces, and then whoever they're doing that to will say, can you stop that? That's rude, it's annoying. And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, sorry, I didn't understand. I didn't realize that there is some etiquette in here. And then they start to look around and see how other people are behaving. So now when there's groups, you'll see circles of people in the metaverse that are standing roughly, it looks like 3 feet apart. About the same distance you see in the physical world when there's a gathering of people all talking and conversing. So there isn't, we haven't programmed in, don't get this close to somebody, don't do this or that, but the community is self-organizing. And I know that there is going to be bad actors and there are going to be problems down the road that we'll have to figure out how to deal with. But we've been quite lucky with respect to how the community is teaching one another and organically learning how to engage with one another in a respectful manner. So I think right now we're at thousands of people walking through, well, tens of thousands of people walking through, depending on the timeline that you're looking at. I think at one point we're going to have millions of people walking through, and that's going to be a completely different social arrangement. If you're going into a lobby with that many people and trying to get through a crowd, there's going to be all these new interactions that unfold. So just from my first hand perspective of how the how these organizations are happening, it like the community is self-organizing, which is very interesting to watch evolve.
Do you think that there is a potential future for things like the VR Facebook, where people will behave better with a virtual interaction than they do on some of the chat rooms in Facebook and other places, which just seem to descend into abusive trolling? And do you think that behavior would let's assume that technology and computing power were unlimited, and as you say, the brick evolved into something really slick. Do you think the social media thing would follow that behavioral pattern?
I can already see differences in communities and behaviors from one district to the next. So, for example, VR chat. That's a place where a lot of people go and they troll each other. They pick on each other. They make fun of one another. They pull pranks on each other. It is a younger demographic that is in there, and it seems to be if you want to go and like mess around with other people, like troll people, that's kind of the place that you go for that. And then there's other places where there's specific games that you're playing and behaviors that you have in those games, and people won't invite you to continue to play in that game if you're not like a good teammate joining in there. And I guess just because it's art world people that seem to be coming through our platform, there's a certain behavior that kind of mirrors what you see in a physical world gallery that is just unfolding in front of us. So I'm sure there will be people that will come through and think it's funny to cause a ruckus, but what I notice is from one district to the next, there's different behaviors, and I guess the same thing, you can go from one neighborhood or one country or one area in the world, and there's different languages, there's different customs, there's different ways that people interact with one another. The same thing.
It's a matter of tribes, basically. People recognize into communities. Probably we will go back.
A little bit.
Just saying that people will go back to tribes very probably, recognizing themselves into communities. Well, let's go to the third question, please. How impenetrable are the boundaries between the gaming metaverse and the work metaverse? Who want to take this? Duncan, maybe.
Good question. How impenetrable are the boundaries between the gaming metaverse and the work metaverse? Well, I think that's an interesting question. I think we've seen the boundaries between the personal life and the work life blur a lot more in the past year and a half, certainly in the UK, than we ever have before. So, you guys are looking at my house here right now. I'm looking in a lot of your personal spaces. That's quite a bizarre thing to have happened and be comfortable with over the past 18 months. So I think that our work lives and our home lives will remain separate. So the work metaverse will have its tools, will have its spaces, and your personal life will have its own tools and spaces. There's not to say there's not going to be an overlap, because one person's work space might be another person's social space. Specifically in Brendon's case, I imagine, I might be going to browse some art for in my social spare time, but be speaking to somebody or interacting with somebody who it's their place of work. So it's a Venn diagram, but I would also not be engaging my friends in just a space where I'm looking at some interactive charts, looking at our sales forecasts, over the next 18 months. So I think there is an overlap, but I think it's important to keep these things separate for the sake of people's mental health and their work-life balance as well. And on that note, I think it's also important to not be in VR too much for your work, for your balance as well. I love VR. I spend a huge amount of time in it. I don't want to sound like I'm being a party pooper when I keep saying there needs to be a balance, but I really believe that it needs to be in moderation, everything in moderation, and be used for what it's good for, and not overwhelm things. So I hope that answers the question somewhat.
I hope so. Is there anyone who wanted to add anything on this, Alex? Yeah, sure, of course, go ahead.
Oh, just going, there's only one trend that we've noticed, which is that in the crypto world, it started off with what I'd call the honorable anarchists, thinking that anonymity was going to be the big thing. And now digital identity has become hugely important, that people won't actually let you occupy a crypto space unless you can actually identify the person on the other end. And I think I don't know, it's not really a comment, it's just simply I've noticed that the way, there's an Irish expression, if I'd wanted to end up here, I'd have started in a different place. And it's a great, you just don't know where this is going to go and predicting it, but it's exciting to see these guys developing this and having a passion for it. And, we should be here to facilitate, as Walter Bagehot once said of the monarchy, we're here to advise, encourage and warn, but we're not here to stop. I think the opportunities actually outweigh the threats.
The risk that I see is that we will end up having multiple selves, which is already happening on any social, and it's already causing a lot of issues in terms of trust into people. And the metaverse will simply add another layer and possibly other identities. That Duncan correctly says, well, probably we will keep the identities or the tools separate, which is okay, but which means that finally, if we want to trust an individual, that individual is the set of selves that are part of his life. So he is staying in the virtual space as well as in the physical space. So what will be the glue that will tell exactly who you are? Were you saying something, Brendon?
Yeah, I just wanted to touch on the idea of how the work metaverse and the gaming metaverses, how they will interact. And I'd just like to frame that in the idea of there being a single metaverse. And then within the subsection, with like a subsection of the metaverse will be like a work district and a gaming district. So I think that they're all part of the same metaverse. It's just like if you were to go to New York, you might go to the financial district to do your business, and then you'll go to the entertainment district to like play games or have fun or do whatever. It's still within the city of New York. So you have the metaverse, and then you have sort of one area of the metaverse you can go for work, another area of the metaverse or another district of the metaverse that you can go for gaming. And with respect to how those worlds come together, Duncan, I think you really touched on a valid point there, is that there are people working in there, and some people will come for entertainment and other people will be working. One thing that's super interesting to consider from a work and gaming perspective, look at Fortnite. Fortnite, they had a concert in their game. That concert had over 12 million people attend the concert. That is a massive, massive amount of business and work being done inside of a game. And then if you think about those 12 million people that attended that concert in a game, what are they going to be comfortable doing in 10 years? They're used to going into a video game, attending a concert, buying things for their game, doing transactions within the game. And then as they go from teenagers into young adults and adults, I think there's going to be a huge amount of business that is happening in similar fashions, transitioning from a game into, all right, now we might be going into board meetings. We might be doing our corporate retreats in these different virtual environments. So I think if you look at how work is going to change from the next generation, you have a generation of kids going to concerts, 12 million people going to a concert. Imagine 12 million people attending a concert in the physical world. It's impossible. Like, you can't even imagine that number. And that's what's happening in these digital spaces right now. There is so much business going on and so much activity. And yes, this is predominantly a younger generation that's going to these concerts, but they're going to be growing up and they're going to be working, and they're going to be very comfortable working in similar virtual environments.
Yeah. Could I just make another point? I completely agree with everything you said there, Brendon. But something you touched on, I think is worth talking about, and that is the concept of this, the metaverse being a singular concept with districts, and something that concerns me a lot. Again, I don't want to sound like a negative Nora, but something we have to bear in mind is the centralization of these services that are being provided. Look at Facebook, look at Google, look at Apple, look at Microsoft. These are huge corporations who run the internet. You know, Google basically runs the internet. Facebook, look at what happened when Facebook went down the other day. You know, you take that from the internet, apply that to the metaverse. The centralization of that is, I think, a very dangerous thing to happen. So who runs that? Who moderates that? Who hosts that? I don't have the answers to these questions, but I think they're important questions to ask when we think about a singular lobby or concept of the metaverse that districts hang off. I don't disagree with it. I do think we need to potentially challenge how it is organized and how it is maintained and how it is run.
I think there's just an interesting piece we're watching. I mean, I don't like trying to be a futurist because I'm almost invariably wrong, and I write code, but you wouldn't want to use it for anything positive because it's crap. But what I do is I spend a lot of time with people writing code and ideas, and this is probably a bit strange, but what I'm seeing is coding becoming somewhat I'm going to say self-perpetuating, but it's better to say it's becoming more organic than inorganic. And as systems talk to each other, and this atomic composability, the ability to take, at the moment, it's just crypto, synthetic data being passed across distributed networks. But there is no reason, if you look at some of the coding that underlines that distributed networking shouldn't be the engine for some of these metaverses. And I think this is my futuristic, I think it will evolve. About 30 years ago, I was asked to do a presentation on where I thought technology was going. And I've still got the slide deck. And I said, that what will happen is that the distribution of media will move from terrestrial TV onto the internet. This was long before the internet had the capacity to do it. And I was right. I was just 20 years out on how long I thought it was going to take. So it's close enough. So what I do see in the world of distributed computing, I think that is at the birth of mankind in terms of what that technology can do. And I do think, being slightly futurist, that these synthetic worlds and synthetic tokens are going to merge. When that merges, you get disruptive technology. And a little bit of history. And you think, well, Google and these guys run the world. Civilization's full. And, you know, at one point, IBM had 97% of the hard disk market. Along came a little upstart called Compaq. And they created a thing called the 5-inch disk. And IBM went, forget it. 2 years later, along came Sun Microsystems and went, hold on a minute, here's a motherboard and a computer that we can put a 5-inch disk on. How long do you think it took for IBM to be out of business on the disk market? I tell you, 18 months. 18 months. So if you look at the history of disruptive technology that creates the law of unintended consequences, you guys have got the vision. But that technology of using the power of distributed computing together with, you know, what you called, I love it, the brick, you know, that can change really quickly when those sort of technologies start to merge. Now, that's a big step, but it's happening really fast. And I'm watching the technologies in the distributed computing space move on. You've got these NFTs. And NFT is a trivial use of distributed computing. It's trivial. Now, take your domains that you're building and build on those in the distributed space. Wow, that's got power. And that could see off people like Google and Facebook really fast. And then you'll get to add to that the behavioral consequences, which is fascinating, about the way people behave in a metaverse where they actually have to interact real time. Can I see that being the next generation? Just the same way Google and Facebook exploded, that's about adoption. And that's nothing companies can do to prevent. It's like running a diesel train in the world, running a steam train in the world of diesel. You can't stop the change. So, okay, you don't think that those companies can fall. Well, they can. You know, the record, can't remember the name of it now, but the huge record stores in the UK, their shares were still going up in value when iTunes were increasing the digital sales online by 400,000 a month exponentially. Bang, suddenly they're gone. You know, I was in a discussion the other night. So, well, I was at a wedding.
Stop.
Remember Blockbuster?
Alex, I love your support to talks. That's fantastic. But we only have 5 minutes, and I definitely want to close this first TiiQu Talk with a little thought from each of you for those who want to enter the space. The reason why they should enter the space, or the reason why they should use virtual reality. What is your point? What is your thought about that? Because here is all about building skills for the future. Alex correctly said that the point is when technologies will merge all together, and at that point it will be absolutely powerful, especially for people, if this merging is distributed. However, what are the skills needed, and why should one want to be in? What is the element that you want to give to our audience as a takeaway?
Brendon, you're on mute yet.
Yeah.
I would just suggest for anybody that's interested in virtual reality in the metaverse to get involved. Like there's a lot of experiences in the metaverse that you can go through your laptop, or if you do grab a virtual reality headset, there's a lot of experiences within the virtual reality headset as well. If you start going to events and meeting people at these events and having conversations, building relationships, building connections in the metaverse, that will just spark a lot of inspiration, because you don't really know what's there until you've gone and explored it a little bit. So I would recommend just getting a VR headset or finding some metaverses that you can explore through your laptop and going into a social context there and meeting some of the people there. I guess I can shamelessly share that we have the Meta Biennale coming up in November 18th. It's a big, huge social event for the arts happening in the Arcade District. That's a perfect example of an event that you could go to if you're interested in the arts. You can join through your laptop or VR headset. So come out there, see what it's all about, talk with people, meet people, build relationships, build connections. If you're not into the arts, Alt Space VR, Decentraland, VR chats, there's so many like really great social experiences that you can go through in the metaverse. So I would really just recommend go out to them. There's conferences that are happening. There's huge crowds of people. You'll learn a lot, you'll connect a lot, and you'll start getting inspired of what this world is becoming. And it's still so early that you can really easily get involved with shaping it.
Thank you very much. Duncan.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with Brendon. I think the thing that I've learned when I began sort of my VR AR journey is that the community around it is really positive and inclusive, and reach out to people and they'll be more than happy to help. Start building your connections network, and if you want to learn some skills, there's numerous skills out there that you can pick up, including 3D rendering, coding, even just design. Those skills that you can bring from the real world into the VR world are as valid as being able to write some code. And I will add, Alex, my code is also a bit shit, but it works, and that's all that matters. So yeah, I think just build those networks and crack on, get involved. Don't wait. Like Brendon says, it is nascent. This is the time. Do it now.
You're on mute, Laura.
Yeah, do you want to close, Alex?
I'm going to say very short. Be brave.
Be brave.
Be brave. And I'll leave you with the words of John Harvey Jones, former chairman of ICI. He was asked one day why young businesses succeed. And he said, because they don't know any better. And being constrained by the past, forget it. Look to the future. Go for it.